Interest rates, or is this just another lie and betrayal from the government? Let's get into this without further ado. So right now we're going to go over to Yahoo Finance, a big positive shift, what economists are saying about the inflation numbers. And we're going to get into the data, guys, and everything in this video. Stay tuned. We're also going to go over slumlords in Canada, which is something that's happening, unfortunately. So anyway, let's see what the mainstream media and the mainstream economists are saying. So after the inflation print last week, they are saying the Bank of Canada will be pleased with January's inflation report, and not just because the headline rate slowed more than expected, said Olivia Cross. The Bank of Canada's preferred measures, CPI trim and CPI median, both slowed to 3.4% and 3.3% respectively, from 3.7% and 3.5%. So I'm going to bring this up on a chart so you can see what's happening there. You can literally see how inflation has obviously declined, but what you can't see here is that these numbers are just completely fake. I mean, the CP lie, as I call it, is just completely inaccurate these days, and especially when you're talking about the January numbers. I've talked about this with the unemployment numbers. I've talked about this many times, how the government can manipulate the numbers massively with these massive seasonal adjustments that they do in things like the CPI and all the data. And we cannot really trust the government, and we'll get into more of that in a second when we go on to the money supply and what's causing that to increase. So it's interesting. So January's inflation print was a big positive shift in the right direction, but the Bank of Canada will still need to see this trend continue before it will be comfortable pivoting to rate cuts. And again, they're talking about pivoting to rate cuts if the economy was doing okay, if the economy was doing well, and that's the reason why inflation was high, which is why the Bank of Canada is supposedly having rates so high right now, is because the economy was just too strong. It was too strong and it needed to restrain it. Then why on earth would they start cutting rates unless the economy got even worse? Now, the funny thing is the government fudges the numbers so much these days that we're already in a recession. It's just most people in the economy haven't even realized it yet. So what that means when it truly hits home for people, it will be way, way too late. And this is the thing with the cycles we're now in. The data is so manipulated that actually the government is misinformed, the Bank of Canada is misinformed, and none of these people, they don't know what's going on. They don't live in the real world. Do you think they go to the grocery store, buy groceries? Do you think you're going to see Tiff McClem at the grocery store buying groceries? No, of course not. So he sits there and he believes these numbers that he's fed off the government, and really he doesn't have any choice in that respect. So anyway, when you look at the money supply, we had some decline in the money supply over 2023. I was doing videos about this, and then the money supply has increased drastically. So we're going to go into the different sectors of the money supply now and break it down. Now, a lot of people miss a couple of things with the money supply, especially with the kind of polarizing politics that we have from the conservatives right now, where they just want to blame everything squarely on the government. And I can see how polarizing that might be, because the government really is to blame for a lot of different things that are happening. But when it comes to the money supply, well, you look at the data and you be the judge, actually. I'll reserve my opinion for later. So you can see this is household debt to GDP. You can see it's peaked and it's down just over 100%. It's at probably around 105%, I believe. And now we're going to go on to private debt to GDP, which is around 260%. No, that's not a joke or a typo. 260%. And now we're going to go over government debt to GDP, which stands around 110%. So what is this telling you guys? It's telling you that it's not just the government that has increased the money supply, it's households, it's private businesses. Every time somebody takes out a mortgage, that creates additional money in the money supply. I mean, money is coming to fruition two avenues: government spending or debt creation via the private sector, which also includes people getting mortgages and everything like that. So people don't often realize that, because a lot of that can actually be destroyed. And the same thing happened in the United States. In fact, if you look at the United States, you can see it as well. What happened was, back in 2008, the private debt to GDP, for instance, it also peaked. You had household debt to GDP that also peaked. I've been through this many times. And that was the first sign and signal that you were in the beginning stages of the deleveraging crisis, was this happening right here, this massive peak. And you're beginning to see it notch up ever so slightly, but that's actually more to do with the slowing economy. And it's crazy because when you look at credit market debt to disposable income over 180%, I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work all this stuff out, guys. If there's more money that has been lent out than there is money in the entire economy to pay those loans back, then you have essentially a pyramid scheme, a debt pyramid scheme. It's essentially a bubble. I mean, all bubbles have to have a massive component of leverage to them. And it's just in Canada, it's not just the government, it's the households, it's the private businesses as well. And that's what I want to kind of tell you, because I know it's polarizing right now. You've got politicians that are up and coming, probably going to be elected. So they want to blame everything on the prior government, even if that's not even accurate. And don't get me wrong, I hate Trudeau. I hate the prior government. I'm not sticking up for Trudeau here. I'm just simply saying that just saying it's government debt, the reason that caused inflation, is completely wrong. I mean, think about this, guys. Somebody gets a mortgage. More and more people get mortgages, which drives up housing prices. And then you can then borrow from your home equity. So that's even more money. And you can literally borrow that as cash. There are credit cards out there, for crying out loud, like from Home Trust, where literally it's based off your home equity. So you can go and spend that into the economy, which creates inflation because you haven't created anything by doing that. So the banking system has allowed people to get more and more leveraged. And this is what nobody in government is telling you. I don't care if they're liberal, NDP, or conservative. I don't hear anybody saying we need to regulate lending more at the banks because this is what causes a lot of inflation. I mean, think about where the inflation came. It came after massive government spending, but it also came after a massive build of household wealth and mortgage issuance, which creates higher velocity because people can spend more from their home equity. There's also the wealth effect that compounds that issue. So that all attributes to causing the CPI or the CPI to increase like we had and keep inflation higher than any of us wanted. So it's really interesting to note. So now let's get on to the Consumer Price Index, the actual report, the government report, the lie report. So the Consumer Price Index CPI rose 2.9% on a year-over-year basis in January, following a 3.4% gain in December. The largest contributor to the headline deceleration was lower year-over-year gas prices for gasoline in January, down 4%. Compared with December, they were up 1.4%. Headline CPI slowed to 3.2% year-over-year, January down from 3.5% in December. Price growth for food purchased from stores slowed year-over-year in January, 3.4% compared with December, 4.7%. And just remember, guys, I've said this time and time again, this is the CP lie. I don't believe these numbers. I mean, I go to the grocery store and I see the prices. I'm not an idiot, but the government literally takes us as a bunch of fucking idiots. Like, they literally think we're too dumb to work out the prices are probably up at least 20% year over year at the grocery stores. I mean, I know, for example, many of the things that we buy, the prices are up over 50%. It's just absolutely crazy. And we're told these numbers. The economists come out of the woodwork and they say, oh yeah, this is great. Rate cuts are coming, guys. Everybody just have a party about the rate cuts coming. But they're not talking about the fact that we are all being destroyed by these numbers being so fake. I mean, this is one of the biggest betrayals of our lifetime, and it has happened all the way back since the 1990s, when central banks, funnily enough, were told to target inflation. And since they started targeting inflation, guess what? The numbers got more and more manipulated just so that they could meet their targets, or whatever sinister reason you think that the numbers are manipulated. overrated. I think there are some definitely evil components to this, like keeping the standard of living lower, which keeps life expectancy lower, keeping more people in debt, which then means, hey, you can control these people much easier, as we found out during the past 4 years, for example. It's very obvious to me. So yeah, I'm not saying that these numbers are cool. I just want to show you what's going on with these numbers. So gasoline prices declined year over year. Gasoline prices fell about 4% in January, following a 1.4% increase in December, largely due to base year effects, which essentially means because the year over year number last year was a lot higher, it brings it down this year because it's not going up as fast as it was last year. Prices are still increasing, guys. They're just not increasing at the same rapid rate. Consumers pay less for airfares. Prices for airfares declined in January 14.3% compared with December 9.7% on a year-over-year basis. On a monthly basis, prices fell in January 23.7% compared with December 31.1%. Airfares typically decline in January as holiday demand subsides. So obviously it's not offsetting what happened in December, and we all know the quality of the service that we're getting at the airlines in Canada is just absolutely atrocious. It's just dreadful. If you fly a lot, you know this. WestJet is one of the worst culprits for this, I believe. And, you know, it's just, it is what it is, quite frankly. And now I want to show you this about Alberta, because very, very interesting, guys. This is extremely interesting. So Alberta was the only province with faster price growth, partly due to higher electricity prices in January, up 120% compared with December, 22.9% as a result of a base year effect. The large monthly decline in January 2023, when many Albertan households received rebates on their electricity bills, subsidies, stimulus, essentially. I know a lot of people are thinking that there isn't stimulus going on. There's still stimulus going on. I'm sorry, but I just can't believe how stupid governments are. And even me, like, I had high expectations a couple of years onwards from when she got in as leader. Nothing's really changed. She's just a new face for the same old party, unfortunately. And that's the problem that people don't understand. It can be very polarizing having these politicians that do all this talking, but just because you can talk, just because you can essentially pull on popular views and become a populist, does not mean you are a good politician, does not mean that you're going to do good by the people, and does not mean that you're going to have any good policies at all. I mean, it's just crazy. And unfortunately, this is just becoming rife now, this kind of populist politics, which, you know, I always say the proof is in the doing, not what people say they will do. It's what they actually do and the results that they get. Especially that is true with politicians, guys, more than anybody else. So I want to show you this chart as well, because it's hilarious. I mean, where on earth do you see the massive declines across here? I mean, it's crazy. If you look at 2023 compared to January 2024, you can see the different price increases place to place, and you can see where is up compared to where is down. And it's very interesting. I will link this in the description. And now I want to show you this. And the reason I want to show you this is because essentially this is the shadow stats CPI using the 1980s based CPI. And I think this is incredibly important for people to understand. So right now, they're saying that the CPI is down around 12%. Think about that. That's probably about right. That's probably about accurate today when you think about all the products you buy, compared to what the government is saying inflation is at, which is below 5%. Now, this is in the US, but you can use the same models because they switched to the same calculations, the CPIU, in the early 2000s. And you can see how this gets more and more manipulated, because if you look at the 1990s based CPI, you can see, oh, well, if you look at the 1990s CPI, it got way above 10%, and now it's come down, it's around 8%. But if you look at the CPIU, again, it's around 4%. So, you know, you're being told constantly inflation is coming down, but it's just complete BS, guys. And now I want to show you this. You have to check this out. I will leave a link to this in the description. It is just disgusting, the type of that is going on in Canada right now when it comes to these slumlords and the kind of disgusting stuff that is going on. Need a girl on a sharing basis. And I mean, look at this. And it's sick what is going on in Canada, that this is being able to be allowed. It is just absolutely crazy. So, you know, this is actually happening and you just can't believe it's happening in Canada. $12.80 for a studio with a shower in the room in Vancouver. I mean, it's crazy. It's not just in Ontario. They're just putting beds, multiple beds in rooms. I mean, this is literally like a third world country that we're turning into. And look at this, guys. I mean, look at the living conditions some of these immigrants and people are having to live in. I mean, to them, this might be normal, but to us, this isn't normal. And as I've said before, the problem with stuff like this is it changes the equation for investing in property, which then means that people can exploit property even more, which keeps prices even higher, which keeps rents even higher, which then means a decline in living standards for all of us. So it's absolutely crazy that this stuff is going on, but it's not surprising considering what we have in Canada. If you are looking for another video that is packed full of data, I suggest you check out this video here, which is about the unemployment numbers. And if you're looking for a VPN to get around Trudeau's censorship laws, go to expressvpn.com/market mania. I will see you in the next one.